Who are you? Not what's your name or what you're good at, but who are you? You, this amazing, complicated, beautiful human being. You, capable of thinking, feeling, laughing, crying, building, playing, giving, loving. You. Have you ever thought about why you are here? Why amongst millions of galaxies there are 7 billion of us on this tiny planet? All trying to find ways to make ourselves happy, peaceful, content as we move through each new day. The truth is, you, me, all of us are here for a reason. Your inherent beauty, your unique unrepeatability is not an accident, but a gift. It's all part of an epic plan. Look around and be amazed. Never before and never again will there be another you. Open your heart and discover who you are.
Hello, my name is Mari Pablo, and I am one of the presenters of the You, Life, Love, and the Theology of the Body program. Wherever you may find yourself in this world, whatever your ethnicity is, however big your house is, whatever your profession is, however good of a dancer you are, each of you have something very beautiful in common. You have all responded to the great call, and that is that you are parents. Cada uno de ustedes son padres. So I want to take a minute to say, welcome to this program. You have been entrusted to your child and they have been entrusted to you. You are the first voice they heard, the first hands they held, the first face they saw. From you they discovered the joys and beauties of dancing, laughing, eating, and so much more. You have been chosen to encourage them, to love them, to be there with them in the good times and the bad, to walk with them and to help them to see and to appreciate their worth. So before anything, I want to take a minute and I want to say thank you. Thank you for the joys, thank you for the laughter, thank you for the headaches, for the sleepless nights, for the long nights, for the conversations, for the ways that you've built them up. Thank you for everything you do on the day-to-day, from the sacrifices you make to the hugs that you share. They could not be who or where they are today without you. So again, thank you, thank you, thank you. I imagine there are moments in your life that you feel unappreciated. And you might think, why am I even watching this video? They have youth ministers, they have teachers, they have aunts and uncles. And you're right, they might have really awesome people in their lives, but no one can replace you as parents, your role. The ways that and things that you can teach them, no one else can. And I know that as parents, we want the absolute best for our children, for ourselves, and for our family. And the beauty of this program is that it's not just about helping your child grow, but it's also inviting you to grow with them, to walk with them, to journey with them. And I know that in this world, it's very easy to get distracted or to allow these lies or separation or to be sucked into social media. And so you're not doing as much face-to-face. This is an opportunity for you to be with them as they learn and to journey with them. And by doing this, you can be restored as a person, and your entire family can be restored. It can bring about healing, it can bring about a new joy, and even a new relationship between you and God, and between you and your child, and between your entire family and God. For this, you are being called.
Bored, busy, distracted, disconnected. If you ever feel that way, you aren't alone. These 4 words sum up the experience of lots of parents, and they also sum up the experience of lots of teens out there. The pace of today's world is fast. Things move. Things are constantly swirling around. I get it. I'm a parent as well. I also understand that probably we can identify with a feeling of trepidation, a feeling of a little bit of fear when we come to understand how big our role is as parents. You are the parent of a teenager whose life is worth the life of God the Son to God the Father. And that can be intimidating, especially when we sit back and consider the challenges that we face when it comes to our role. The good news I have for you is that there's hope. And that hope comes, of course, from Jesus Christ, and it comes to us in the church, especially in the teaching of the theology of the body. This program, the U program, is here for you to provide a resource and a tool to deal with that trepidation. We have to understand the culture of our teens, but we also have to step back and understand a little bit about our own culture, our own experience. So back to the boredom, the busyness, the distraction, the disconnection. All of this can make it very hard for us to find ways to relate to our teens. When we ourselves are swirling around, when we're trying to get things done for work, when we're dealing with the pace of going back and forth from practices and school and work, all of that can be very hard. And so where do we find time? Where do we find space in order for us to really engage our teens? Hope. There's hope for you as a parent. Raising a teen in today's world can be difficult. But there is hope for you. There's hope for you as an individual. Some of you who are out there experiencing hurts for yourselves. You've experienced difficulties in your marriage. Maybe some of you are going through a divorce or have been through a divorce. But hope and healing is something that you need for yourself so that you can be effective as a parent. We want to offer you the opportunity to sit back and reflect on how the gospel and our whole Catholicism is essentially about hope and healing. We can do better when it comes to our teenagers than throwing up our hands and saying, whatever. Sometimes we tolerate their behavior because we feel dissatisfied with our own behavior, because we look back at our own past and we haven't healed our own wounds or experienced the healing of Christ in our own wounds. But if we can do that, then we can be more effective as parents. We can help our teens to experience life in a thriving way. Jesus says in John 10:10, I came that they would have life and have it abundantly. Don't you want that for your teen? Don't we all want that for our children? So how? How can we do this when the deck seems so stacked against us? Well, we can do more than just have the talk. You know, the kind of idea of a punctuated, awkward talk in the middle of the day that happens with an 11 or 12-year-old. And maybe sometimes we think that talk can happen 2 or 3 times during adolescence. But the reality is, our formation of our teens needs to be more than one talk. It needs to be an ongoing process, an ongoing relationship. This program, U, provides a way for you to do more than have a talk. It provides a framework for you to have a much bigger discussion that's not just an awkward talk about biology and sex itself, but that's a talk about character, about formation, about identity, about what it means to be a man, what it means to be a woman. The theology of the body of St. John Paul II is a teaching that's about all of those things. And as a parent, it will provide you an opportunity to grow a relationship with your teen and to form them in a way that will help them not only to be happy, but to be thriving, even to be saints, to be a teen who knows how to chart a course toward their own vocation. St. John Paul II, the theology of the body. That's the undergirding layer of everything that we do. St. John Paul II's theology of the body is a teaching that helps us to understand sex not just as an action, but sex as something integral to identity. The theology of the body of St. John Paul II is his teaching when it comes to the meaning and destiny of our humanity, the meaning of our masculinity and our femininity. We know from experience and from our previous program that teens can talk about these things. Teens can be formed in this way, and it can be life-changing. St. John Paul II's theology of the body, if you're not familiar with it, is composed of 129 Wednesday audiences given during his early pontificate. The theology of the body, had John Paul II not been John Paul II, had he not been Pope, would have been a book, and that book still would have been a great treasure for the church. But because this teaching was delivered by a Pope, now a Saint Pope, it bears so much weight and has so much to do with the way that we can view the topics of anthropology, of what it means to be human. Now, this may seem hard, either because it's too lofty, or maybe because you feel like it's too awkward. But let me give you a different way to think about the theology of the body. We've often used this analogy. Think about a pair of glasses. This is a true story. When I was 30 years old, I went to the DMV and was told that I had a pretty severe astigmatism. After having a little visit to the eye doctor, I found that that was true, and I was given glasses. Now, for 30 years, I had driven my car, I had done all kinds of things, and I never really ran into a tree or did anything bad like that. But when I put on my glasses for the first time, the world became three-dimensional. And that's kind of what the theology of the body does for many of our teens, and actually for those of us who've worked on this study and who are resourcing this study. We believe that the gospel can bring clarity to all of the questions of our lives, especially questions of identity and sexuality. And that's something that can be true of teens, it's something that can be true of parents, and really for all of us. And so this program, this U program, maybe you were hoping that you could just drop your teen off to their parish and we would sort of magically give them back to you at the end of the night and they would have all of this stuff put together. But no, it's not going to work that way. For real formation to happen, you need to be involved. You, the parent. And we provided resources for this. So the parent guide that I've been alluding to, don't just put it in your car and let it sort of slip between the seats and discover it 2 years later. Don't just put it on your table and allow all kinds of mail to pile on top of it. Take it out and use it. If you're a little nervous about what to do with the guide, about how to have these conversations, we know that the leaders in your parish, the leaders in your school, they're going to help you with this. Not only that, but you're surrounded by other parents who are dealing with the same things that you are. The parents around you understand the busyness. They understand the struggles of raising a teenager. And so network, sit down together, share. This will be a great help. Remember this also. It's not so much that you've loved God, but that God loved you first. Sometimes as parents, we get in a mode where we're thinking about our teens, we're thinking about our children, we're thinking about our jobs, we're thinking about other things. We forget to receive. We'll become better parents, we'll become better spouses, we'll become better at everything if we keep this in mind. It's not so much that we've loved God, but that God loved us first. And so receive that love as a parent, and then you'll be able to give it even more.
So now we get to the part of the session where we talk about tough topics, tough questions that are going to come up as parents and youth ministers. And you have been the one that has been chosen and entrusted to answer these tough topics that our teens are going to have. And so before we dive in, I think it's important to cover some of the basics ways and best approach to cover these things. And I think one of the main ways and best ways to do this is through love and mercy. Because if we love our kids and they know that we want what's absolutely best for them, then they're going to be open and they're going to respond to that. And this is looking at and continuing with the approach of Pope Francis, that he's always speaking about love and mercy. And by first bringing them into that and by bringing them into God's heart, then they're going to know that what you have to say is coming from that place. And they're going to be open and they're going to be receptive to that. And so another thing that we want to say is don't be afraid. I know there are going to be awkward moments. It's going to be tough. Just embrace the awkwardness and be bold and understand that it's okay. One, it's okay if you don't know everything. I think as parents and I think as youth ministers, we want to be the ones like, I have all the answers. But it's really beautiful when our kids know that we don't have all the answers. And so first of all, you need to educate yourself. We need to educate ourselves so that we can be able to be giving them the truth at all times, because they're going to respond to that truth. And if you're not sure about something, simply say, like, I'll get back to you, go back, ask some questions and return to them with that answer. And I think they're going to respond beautifully to that. So don't be afraid, be open, do everything with love and mercy, don't judge. And also understand that all of our teens and all of us are broken. And so a lot of times we need to do things with a lot of love and care, but also understanding not just the spiritual side of things, but also the psychological side of things. And understanding that there are multiple facets of how to answer these questions. So to bring in science, to bring in psychology, and to bring in faith, and to do all of this in the center with God in the middle. And I think that's the best way to do this. And above all, of course, through prayer. Allow yourself to be open to the guidance of the Holy Spirit. Allow yourselves to be beacons of light, to be instruments to speaking truth in this world of darkness.
So number one, gender identity. Maybe this is one of the hottest topics in our culture. And this may be one of the things that you weren't thinking so much about when you were a teen, the way that your teenager is. How do we address this? Well, number one, I think we do have to affirm that there's such a thing as gender stereotyping, that it does exist in our culture and our world. If we go all the way back to Genesis chapter 3 and we look at the consequences of sin in the world, we find that part of that is the perception of inequality between man and woman. And this plays out through history in many ways. In our own day and age, there still are very powerful stereotypes out there of what's macho or what's girly. And yet, those stereotypes are not the essence of manhood and womanhood. And so we can affirm this to our teens that yes, those stereotypes are not good. And yes, they need to be rehabilitated. And actually, the gospel can help us with that. We can find the complementarity of manhood and womanhood in the authentic version of the gospel. But this inequality does not mean that there's no such thing as sex, manhood, womanhood. This is written and stamped into our very bodies and is part of our identity. When we celebrate, say, the Feast of the Assumption, and we think about Mary assumed body and soul into heaven, she remains forever a woman in eternity, that she epitomizes the feminine genius. We run a danger in our culture because of gender ideology of seeing these things lost. We have to remind our teens that stamped into their very bodies is their reality of manhood and womanhood.
When I talk about this with my class, oftentimes we have this like feminist mentality, right? And people will say like, well, Ms. Pablo, are you saying that I can't be strong and I can't be a leader? I'm like, no, of course you can. But we need to understand that just because we can do that doesn't mean that it's okay if we don't, right? That we need to embrace what it means to be male, what it means to be female, and that we need to be able to witness and to see how these two roles complement each other, and how if men are being men and women are being women, we're bringing out the best in each other. And I think that's the aspect that we need to be focusing on when it comes to what it means to be male and what it means to be female, to help them and walk with them to see how beautiful they complement each other, even when looking at the body. And then taking it further when looking at relationships, guy relationship and girl relationships as friendships first, and how these relationships and friendships, when done correctly, we can bring out the best in each other.
We know that for a lot of the deepest issues that the human person faces, there are no microwave quick fixes. The solution to most of our deepest existential woes is much more of a crock pot. It takes a long time for us to experience that healing. And this would be true of somebody who's experiencing gender confusion. Our approach needs to be pastoral and loving. If you find in your own family, or perhaps someone who's watching this is experiencing gender confusion for themselves, you are loved by God. You are loved and accepted by the church. And the challenges that we find in church teachings are in no way to be accusing. They're in no way to point a finger at you. The challenges in church teachings are about the love of Jesus Christ. Why else would the church stand in opposition to so many popular ideas in the culture? It certainly doesn't help to put money in collection plates. It doesn't put more people in the pews. Sometimes love stands against what's popular in order to do what's actually loving, even if it's not what's most convenient.
I remember it was my first year teaching morality, and of course, bombarded with a lot of difficult questions. But I remember one day specifically, one of my teens came up to me after class. He sat down, he was super serious, and he's looking at me and he's like, "Miss Pablo, I need to tell you something." I'm like, "Okay, like what's up?" And he looks at me and he says, "I struggle with homosexuality." I'm like, okay. And he was shocked. Just by me simply just being calm and just saying like, okay, that's totally okay. He was very, very shocked because he had this idea that the church was gonna hate him and that he wasn't welcome. And I explained to him what the church is actually teaching and why. And I spoke about how he's always welcome, how he can definitely still pray, how he can definitely still be Catholic. And you slowly saw his face just smile more and more as I continued. And he said to me, he was like, "Thank you so much. Like, I didn't know, it's such a relief to me that I can still practice my faith." And unfortunately, I think this is the main issue with this topic, that it's so misunderstood. So many people don't understand what the church is actually saying. And so when it comes to this topic, again, we need to do things with love, and we need to do it as the church is calling us to do. But not only that, I think it's also important to do things in order. And so we can't talk about why homosexuality or acting on homosexuality is a sin until we go back to the beginning, Adam and Eve, the purpose of our bodies, the purpose of sex as total free, of marriage as total free, fruitful, and faithful, unitive and procreative. This is not going to make sense without this. And so it's important to go in order, but at the bottom line, it's important to love them where they are, walk with them and encourage them, and help them to know that they are always welcome.
The first thing we have to remember is that everyone is made in God's image and likeness. And however we experience our attractions, we are loved. The challenge of the gospel toward purity is a challenge that is there for all of us, every single one of us watching this, whether we're married, single, religious, priests, all of us are challenged toward chastity, toward making a gift to others with our bodies. And that love is the love that's authentic, that's the love of the gospel. And so when it comes to the questions that teens ask about same-sex attraction, can't this person find fulfillment and happiness? The answer is yes. God calls us all to fulfillment and happiness. But we have to acknowledge that fulfillment and happiness is not the same as having an active sex life. Fulfillment and happiness is about finding sexual integrity in any state of life. And so let's be clear to our teens that the church's teaching is one of love. It is one of acceptance. Let's make that more real and three-dimensional in our own parishes, in the people that you encounter. Be loving, be accepting, and at the same time, remember that Jesus challenged. I'll often go back to John chapter 8 to one of the challenges that Jesus is faced with. There's a woman who's caught in adultery in a particular sexual sin, and everyone is standing around her ready to throw rocks at her. Jesus bends down and writes in the sand, and when he straightens himself up, everyone clears out. For he says, "Whoever's without sin, cast the first stone." And they all walk away and throw down their stones to the ground. Eventually, face to face with the woman, Jesus looks her in the eyes and says, "Hey, just keep doing what you're doing. You do you. Have a great day." Of course, that's not really what happens. Jesus looks her into the eyes and he loves her and he challenges her. Go and avoid the sin. This has to be our approach. Whether it's with same-sex attraction, whether it's with a friend that we may have, maybe us as adults, we find someone in our own life, a family member, a friend who's living against purity. We still love, but we have to challenge. That's a part of it.
Another topic that is probably going to come up is the topic of contraception. And for a lot of us, this is a tough topic, and one that maybe you're not even sure of what the church teaches or why it teaches it. And so, one, it's important to realize that if you're on the pill for reasons that are not birth control, that it is okay. But it's also important to inform yourself and to inform ourselves so that when our teens come and ask us questions, we can say, we know what the church teaches, but also, how does this affect our bodies? And are there other options? And what is the best option for us? And how can we be giving and putting into our bodies the best that it deserves? And so we need to be able to be beacons of light and to be able to walk with our teens, to inform ourselves, and to be able to help them to see that there are other options and that we can be able to move past this. A topic that is connected with contraception is the topic of abortion. And this is a topic that I am constantly seeing the effects of this. I remember I work with women in a retreat, and it's an inner healing retreat. I remember one day, a woman came up to me and she opened up about her experience and started saying how she's had an abortion. And this woman is like bawling her eyes out, and she's looking at me and she's saying, you know, I've never been able to actually talk to anyone about this. It's something that I'm so ashamed of. And she's continuing to try to get her words out. And she says, I always think back on what my child would have been, who he or she would have been. And I have nightmares, and I have sleepless nights, and I think about the white walls, and I remember the smell, and I remember the sounds. And she's continuing to describe every single detail of the moment of her abortion. And I'm looking at her brokenness, and I'm loving her where she's at. But I'm starting to realize, and I started to understand the importance of ministering to people who have already had abortions. The truth is that most of our teens and most of us have either know someone for sure that has probably had an abortion, or unfortunately they themselves has gone through it. And so it's important for us to be able to love them, to meet them where they're at, and to be able to minister, because the psychological aspects of abortion are so intense, and we want to be able to help them to restore. We want to help them to build and to be able to heal from this horrible event, and to, again, as we've mentioned multiple times, to walk with them and to hold their hands and to bring them to He who is the healer and He who can restore. And I think this is a beautiful challenge and a beautiful call that we have, and that we are being called to respond to.
Pornography. Our culture is saturated in it. Certainly pornography has been around for a long time, but never before in the history of the world have we been as saturated with it as we are now. That all of us on our electronic devices have access to an open box of pornography that stretches its tentacles throughout the world. How can we help our teens to stand up against the pressures of pornography? Many of the teens who open up to us about this find themselves addicted. As a matter of fact, I can think of in the last year at least a dozen young men who I've talked to who've confessed pretty much the same scenario. That at age 12, through their phones, through an iPad, through whatever device they happened to be on, they were exposed to pornography and it became an addiction. And that for many of them, later in their teen life, they've gotten a lot more serious about walking in their faith, about entering into a relationship. One even shared with me that they were discerning a vocation and still were finding themselves with this addiction. We can walk with young people in this way as well. We can be with them in their addiction in prayer. We can be with them in support. And for all of us, our role is to be a giant pointing finger toward the sacrament of reconciliation. Not a finger pointed in accusation toward our teens, but a finger pointing toward Christ, the one who can heal.
I know it's a tough topic, and I know it's probably going to bring some awkward moments. Just embrace the awkwardness. It's important to realize that if you don't talk about this topic, that they're talking about it, and they're talking about it in a different light. Unfortunately, this is one of those topics that has just been normalized and become mainstream, and they're saying jokes about it and they just see it as normal. And all guys are making jokes about it, and then girls are hearing the guys say jokes about it, and so they think that they're the only girl struggling with it, and so they won't say that they're struggling with it, and then they feel trapped, they feel alone, and they feel isolated. And so one, be authentic, be real, bring it to the light. And two, it is very important to understand that it's not just men that struggle with this, that women struggle with it too. And we need to address that. And to understand it's not just about our faith aspect, of course. And I think, we do a great job in the You videos to understand why pornography is wrong, but not just from a faith aspect, but also looking into the science of it and how the pornography causes addiction and the chemicals that are released and all these things, and how pornography and masturbation not only affect future relationships, but they also affect us as a person, and how much that can cause a huge negative effect, not only on ourselves, but on our entire culture. And so we need to be able to walk with our teens, to hold their hands and to help them to move forward. And to, even though it's gonna be a hard topic, but we need to be able to say, I get that this is a struggle, but it's not a joke. It goes so much deeper, and we need to be the ones to help them to move past this in order to reshape and to move forward for this culture.
Maybe some of you who are watching would say, this isn't just a teen issue. I myself am finding a real strong tug toward pornography in my own life. You may even say, well, what's wrong with it in the first place? I'll remind you of what St. John Paul II said. The problem with pornography is not that it shows too much, is that it shows too little. That pornography cuts the human person up into body parts and causes us not to see others, but to see their body parts. If you're a parent and your young person comes to you with this, I would almost guarantee that there has been a lot of internal wrestling that's taken place before they even open their mouth to you, and that they're looking for something to change. They're looking for you to intervene. So don't be afraid to be a tough parent who's a loving parent in those moments. Not to point a finger of accusation again, but to challenge your son, to challenge your daughter. Of course, the greatest weapon we have against pornography is prayer. That's the greatest weapon we have against any evil that we face. And when a teen comes to talk to you about these issues, don't just make some future promise to pray for them. Pray with them in the moment. Invite them into prayer. Invoke St. Michael the Archangel, who always is with us to fight and ward off evil in our hearts. And we can win the battle against pornography. We can help our young people toward purity. And there we'll find that our young people are better able to discern their vocations, to move on toward purity, to have healthy and integrated relationships. And that's true not only for them, it's true for you too.
When addressing all these tough topics, it's difficult because we don't know what our teen is going through. There are teens that could be going through gender issues or struggling with homosexuality, or people that are on contraception or maybe even had abortions. And we could see that and understand that a lot of them probably are having premarital sex. It's crazy to see the stats. I read a stat somewhere that said that 95% of Americans have premarital sex. And when I saw that, I was taken back. I was like, oh man. And I look at my classes and I look at all these things and my heart breaks, because a lot of times, again, this topic is just seen as normal, right? If you're in a relationship, after a couple of times, people are just having sex and they're not seeing what the big deal is. And that's the problem, that they're not seeing what the big deal is. And so what's beautiful about this program is that we're trying to refocus and to remember and remind them that sex is meant to be holy, that sex is beautiful, and that it's meant for marriage because it's meant to be procreative and unitive, and it's meant to be giving yourself completely to the other. And I think this is the best way to address premarital sex. If we focus on the beauty of what sex is actually meant to be, how it's meant to be procreative and unitive, how we're meant to be giving ourselves completely to the other, and if we talk about it with such a beautiful holiness, then it's gonna counteract the culture that says that sex is lustful and that it's just about how you feel. but we're taking it a step further. And if we focus on the holiness of it, then we'll be able to see how they're not meant for premarital sex, because that is meant for marriage and the sacrament of marriage. And so this is what we're being called to be able to speak about this truth and to bring this into the light. And of course, there are going to be these teens that are having premarital sex already. And so how do we address that? Again, with love, a lot of love, and focusing on mercy and encouraging them, no matter what they've going through, no matter any of these tough topics, take them back to the sacraments, take them back to confession, take them back to Mass. Speak about the power of the Eucharist. Speak about the power and importance of going to the sacraments, going to God, and also of keeping each other accountable, of accountability, of community, of all of these different things, and how all of these things, if we're walking with the Lord and walking in the Lord's path, then we're able to be the best that we can be, because we're living out our true identity as sons and daughters of God.
The next topic we could discuss here is the teen who comes to you and has the very practical concern, I have all of these raging hormones. I have all these desires. Maybe it's a teen who's currently in a relationship and has very strong feelings, and they very realistically state to you that marriage is a long way off. What am I supposed to do with all of these feelings? I'll often use the image of a rubber band, that if you pull a rubber band too tightly in either direction, it simply snaps. And this can be true of our sexuality too. If we repress our desires, if all we do is say no, 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 and we sort of stuff it down, we find ourselves unhealthier than when we started. This is not the way to sanctity. As a matter of fact, that repression, we have a word for it. It can be scrupulosity. And that scrupulosity, while it may be a step on the way toward actual integration, that scrupulosity is not healthy. It's not where we want to land. And so to that teen, we would say find ways to employ your sexuality towards self-giving. What I mean by that is find ways to love. Sigmund Freud, the sort of father of modern psychology, has this idea that undergirding all of our desires is our id, or our libido, or our sexual energy. And he thinks everything is about that. The insight of St. John Paul II is, sure, this is a very, very powerful force, but below the libido, below that is a drive not just towards sex, but a drive toward communion, toward relationship and love. What do you do when you're 10 years out? You focus that energy toward actual love as self-gift. We find creative outlets. And I've seen this happen beautifully in the lives of lots of teens. And even in my own walk toward chastity, into teenage life and in toward adulthood, I found a lot of growth in moving outward with my love. And so the teens who you're working with, or the teens who you may be even parents of, need direction toward how to do that. Not in repression, not in the ignoring of things, not in an overly rules-focused morality, but in a trajectory and a mode of self-giving love. 10 years out, practice now. I'll often give this analogy. If you were on a soccer team and you wanted to win a state championship, in order to win the state championship, you would practice playing soccer well. There are no teams out there that are running soccer drills and kicking the ball in the wrong direction, or who are out there practicing all the wrong fundamentals. Training for the state championship is all about doing things the right way and doing them repeatedly and in succession. And the same is true of our sexuality. Building good habits in teen relationships right here and right now. That's part of the answer to that question. What do you do now? Make your sexuality a gift to God and a gift to the church.
Hello again, and thank you again for taking this journey with us. But the beautiful thing is that this is just the beginning. Now you get to take everything that you're learning, everything that you have watched and discussed with your kids, and implement it on a day-to-day basis. So thank you once again. This is just the beginning. Know that you are in my prayers and in my thoughts, and I know that God is going to do incredible things through you and for you.
Never before and never again will there be another you.